for the EU elections began on Monday at midnight with a record 34 lists in France. These elections will be a litmus test for the Gilets Jaune or Yellow Vest movement, which began protesting against President Macron and his reform programme 6 months ago.
But the Yellow Vests are quite diverse. They go from the far left to the far right and everything in between, and getting them federated in an election is no small feat.
Some supporters are rejecting the elections out of hand, refusing to be part of the system. Others are running as candidates, including on Evolution Citoyenne list, led by the controversial Christophe Chalençon.
He's the one who created a political spat between France and Italy when he invited the leader of the populist Five-Star movement, Luigi Di Maio, to join in one of the Yellow Vest protests a few weeks ago.
But the only list on which all 79 candidates say they are Gilets Jaunes is Alliance Jaune, led by the French singer Francis Lalanne. I went along to their HQ in central Paris to meet number 13 on the list, André Lannee. He's a DJ and he's come up from his village of Saint-Joire near Grenoble in the French Alps to help run the campaign.
Alors, hop, petite affiche.
André Lannee unrolls a wad of campaign posters and takes one out. It's bright blue and yellow with Alliance Jaune, la révolte par le vote, revolt through voting, printed in big letters. There's no photo because their list has no leader. It's a citizens' campaign.
We don't want to be leaders. We just want to give Yellow Vest our voice. We want to federate around all revendication, around all kind of Yellow Vest.
Going to go and stick up a poster?
Let's go.
34 metal billboards are positioned in front of a nearby school. Alliance Jaune is number 28. Got his glue. Is this the first time you've put up a campaign poster?
Yes, it's the first time. It's the first time there is a project I believe really, really deeply. And maybe the last, but it will not be the least. We will not stop until we give to our country a real democracy and a real good way of ruling the country.
Lannee's involvement in the Gilets Jaunes movement goes back to the 17th of November last year, when people gathered at roundabouts up and down the country to protest over the introduction of a green tax on petrol and diesel. Many of them on low incomes in the provinces depend on their diesel vehicles, and the new tax was the final straw.
On the first roundabout, I bring my musical stuff and I put music all day long. Everybody was singing and dancing on the roundabout. It was a feast. It was a party.
As the movement grew and moved into big cities, what began as a festive protest turned into a sometimes violent revolt. Public attention focused on the clashes between protesters, along with ultras from right and left, black bloc anarchists and the police.
Bonjour.
A teenage pupil stops to look at the poster. I'm not surprised that the Gilets Jaunes are involved in these elections, he says. They have good ideas, but there's too much violence between them and the riot police, and it's not all coming from the riot police either.
The black blocs, it's just a nightmare for us. They are stupid.
There have also been some yellow vests smashing things up.
Okay, maybe some Yellow Vest smash things. Maybe because there's a 27th week they fight, and 27th week the government tell us, go home, I don't want to hear you.
Lannee believes the Gilets Jaunes protests can now only be resolved through the ballot box, and these European elections are a stepping stone to building a more direct democracy. The Alliance Jaune manifesto proposes a series of taxes on big corporations, financial transactions, and a green tax on heavy fuel like kerosene. And they would use the money to
make our citizens happy, make our citizens able to live properly of their work, just food in their fridge. Even with 2,000 euro in France, you can't live properly.
One of their key demands is a transfer of power from the president to the people via what they call the RIC, or Citizens' Initiative Referendum. MPs and MEPs would be called to account via referendum. They could be sacked, laws could be proposed, even repealed.
RIC is the only way to rule a real democracy. We are citizens. We want to decide the way our country is ruled. If one of our representatives don't make a good job, we ask him to justify. And after we are going to go to all European country to speak with the yellow vest in the other country and make a real democratic group in Europe in 5 years. Put citizens in the center of the decisions and not politicians and not technocracy.
They would set up a network of EU satellite offices here in France, and whenever Alliance Jaune MEPs voted on something, the motion would also be put to their constituents back here. So MEPs would no longer be representatives with decision-making powers, but subject to constant scrutiny and approval by the people. The Gilets jaunes movement is varied. Some are sovereignists, anti-Europe, others refuse any involvement in organised politics. But the RIC is a common thread. Given that around two-thirds of French law is linked to the EU, André Lannee says yellow vest demands have to reach Brussels.
We need to be in Europe to have a better life in France. I think we don't want more Europe, we don't want less Europe, we want better Europe.
Laurent, tu t'as vu pour Dreux?
At Alliance Jaune HQ, he discusses getting that message out with another volunteer. Not easy when you're running a campaign on a shoestring with volunteers and candidates dipping into their own pockets. Alliance Jaune is luckier than some other new lists. Francis Lallande's notoriety has helped them secure an €800,000 bank loan, underwritten by a billionaire friend of his. If they get at least 3% of the vote, the state will reimburse their expenses. But the latest opinion polls suggest that Alliance Jaune could score as low as 1%. André's enthusiasm, however, remains intact.
We don't go to a fight thinking, okay, maybe we are not going to win. So for the moment, we win much more than 3%. Please, much more.
At the very least, these elections will show just how much support there really is for the Gilets jaunes and whether they're still a force to be reckoned with.
Promets-moi si tu me survis d'être plus fort.
That's it for this week. Spotlight on France is a podcast from the English service of Radio France International. This episode was mixed by Guillaume Buffet.
And if you like what you hear, tell us about it. Our email address is spotlight.france@rfi.fr. And even better, find Spotlight on France on Apple Podcasts and rate and review us.
That helps people find us. You can subscribe to the show there or in your favorite podcast platform. See you next Friday.